Hello, everybody. Danky here with another exciting episode of me pissing people off on the internet. Um, this is sort of a follow up to my video about Hong Kong. It's not directly related to Hong Kong, so more generally, it's just about China. But, I posted my Hong Kong video to Breadtube, and this commenter says, well, first of all, I said the extradition bill is canceled, so the protests keep going anyway. And he says, as it turns out, if you beat the protesters hard enough, they will just turn the protests into anti-government ones. Whoops. So, I say in retort, a challenger approaches, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, so I say in retort, I say it also turns out that if you accept funding from the net and talk to hostile foreign governments to support imperialism, that sort of makes you a movement that caters to U.S. imperialism, therefore not a proletarian movement. The Hong Kong protests are a phony color revolution to destabilize China to counter the Belt Road Initiative. The U.S. bourgeoisie is shitting their pants at losing the economic dominance over the third world. Am I saying the Chinese government is perfect and flawless? Hell no. But to ignore the elephant in the room with regards to the funding of these so-called protests for democracy is to be blind to the blatant Western imperialism. So, he says, so you don't mind being arbitrarily arrested and detained for, I don't know, saying President Xi looks like Winnie the Pooh. The bill claims serious offense, but there is no due process to ensure that the boundary is actually enforced. And he says, perhaps you like the Patriot Act more than you care to admit. So let's talk a little bit about Winnie the fucking Pooh, alright? Because he's the one who went there. So let's talk about Winnie the Pooh. Alright. Now, do I think President Xi looks like Winnie the Pooh? Absolutely. Now it says China bans, this is from The Guardian by Benjamin Haas. It says, China bans Winnie the Pooh film after comparisons to President Xi. Memes likening Xi to the portly Pooh have become a vehicle in China to mock the country's leader. It says, who's afraid of Winnie the Pooh? The Chinese government, apparently. Chinese censors have banned the release of Christopher Robin, a new film adaptation of A.A. Milne's beloved story about Winnie the Pooh, according to The Hollywood Reporter. Winnie the Pooh character has become a lighthearted way for people across China to mock their president Xi Jinping, but it seems the government doesn't find the joke very funny. It started when Xi visited the U.S. in 2013, and an image of Xi and then President Barack Obama walking together spurred comparisons to Winnie, a portly Xi walking with Tigger, a lanky Obama. Alright, well, cool meme. Of course, I think Shinzo Abe, Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. Shinzo Abe looking like Eeyore is a pretty apt comparison too. I don't really know about the Tigger thing. That's kind of, I don't know, dude. It says, as comparisons grew and the memes spread online, censors began erasing the images which mocked Xi. The website of U.S. television station HBO was blocked last month after comedian John Oliver repeatedly made fun of the president's apparent sensitivity over comparisons of his figure with that of Winnie. The segment also focused on China's dismal human rights record. Another comparison, let me get a drink real quick. Says another comparison between Z and Winnie, blah blah blah. Alright, but here at the very bottom, I want you guys to read this. I want you all to read this with me. Another reason for the film's rejection by the authorities may be that China only allows 34 foreign films to be registered in cinemas each year. That leaves Hollywood summer blockbusters, family films, and contenders from across the world jockeying for a tiny number of spots. Christopher Robin is the second Disney film to be denied a release this year after A Wrinkle in Time was blocked, while the studio's Ant-Man and the Wasp will open this month. So let's put our thinking caps on, ladies and gentlemen, really quick and think about this for longer than 2 fucking seconds. Now, would it be funny and would it suit the Western narrative if, oh, this is just the evil President Xi censoring China and censoring them and leaving them unable to view Christopher Robin, which I'm sure is just an amazing fucking film that the Chinese people are just completely missing out on? Or could it be that the Chinese cinema doesn't want to clog up their theaters with a bunch of bullshit Western movies like Christopher Robin, when there's other cooler movies like Ant-Man and the Wasp? To me, it's not so much that this movie had Winnie the Pooh, and because Xi was compared to Winnie the Pooh, that means that Xi wanted to block the country, or block the movie from coming into the country. It seems much more likely that they just denied this film because there were better films like Ant-Man and the Wasp. But let's also look at this whole John Oliver situation, okay? So the whole narrative is that, oh yeah, the Chinese government, Weibo, their site Weibo, was censored, censoring mentions of John Oliver because he made fun of Xi Jinping and compared him to Winnie the Pooh. Now, no, my friends, that's not what this was. This had jack shit to do with Winnie the Pooh. I don't know what the West's whole fucking obsession is, but no, my friends, the censoring, if anything, was over John Oliver's mention of the social credit scoring system and just the blatant anti-China, anti-government stance that John Oliver took. You honestly think the Chinese government and the Chinese microblogging site Weibo would host this kind of shit? Yeah, so, once again, cry me a motherfucking river. This isn't the first time that John Oliver has shilled for imperialism. He's done the same fucking thing with Venezuela. And am I saying that the Chinese government is perfect and great? No, I'm not. And am I saying that Xi Jinping doesn't deserve to be compared to Winnie the Pooh? No, I don't. But stop bullshitting me, The Guardian. Stop bullshitting me, John Oliver. Stop bullshitting me, Western media. And to this commenter, stop bullshitting me, dude. Because this isn't about Winnie the Pooh. And by the way, I haven't found any fucking records of people getting arrested for comparing President Xi to Winnie the Pooh. That sounds like some fucking Red Scare hysteria if ever I've seen it. So he says, perhaps you like the Patriot Act more than you care to admit. Do I like the security state? Do I like the police state? Fuck no. What kind of an asinine comment is that to make? Dude, the United States government has used the Patriot Act. They've used any act done in the name of counterterrorism and national security. They've used that to suppress and oppress leftist movements. Look at my video I made about COINTELPRO. That's the US government using the security apparatus machine to suppress the left. So obviously, no, I don't like the Patriot Act, dumbass. You say, therefore, it's not a proletarian movement. And you say, jokers such as you are what I regularly poke fun at over the dinner table. What, you say I'm a joker because I care about the working class? I don't understand this. What's there to poke fun at here? Haha, here's a guy who doesn't fucking shill for the National Endowment of Democracy. Here's a guy that doesn't just parrot Western propaganda without reading a little bit more into it and looking at it for longer than 2 fucking seconds, instead of just buying into the Red Scare anti-communist narrative that I get pushed down my throat every fucking day watching American media. Say, does any of the concerns raised by the protesters needs a, quote, proletarian movement to become legitimate? If they are protesting for democracy, then yes, my friend, yes. It needs to be of the proletariat, by the proletariat, and for the proletariat. Doesn't need to be this petty bourgeois reactionary fucking, President Trump, come in and liberate Hong Kong, because we Chinese people are too stupid to figure out how to do democracy over here. We need our US capitalist masters to come show us how it's done. We need our British colonialist masters to come whip us back into shape and get us all re-addicted to opium again. Say, or do you sincerely think frickin' Jack Ma is a proletariat and the CCP cares about anything other than amassing wealth for the privileged few? Don't make me laugh. Alright, I don't know who Jack Ma is, so you got me there, friend. You checkmated me. It's time for me to just delete my whole fucking channel, because I don't know who Jack Ma is. Maybe I should have done more research. Maybe I'll do a video about him in the future. A future about him in a video, dude. I'll do one of that. The CCP cares about anything other than amassing wealth for the privileged few. I mean, dude, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like the CCP are all sunshine and roses. I'm not. Alright? I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like they don't have problems. They don't have big problems. But the US, my friend, the US government has much bigger problems. They are the biggest fish to fry right here with me, right? I could care less, right? I could care less if the CCP does some scummy things here and there compared to the overwhelming amount of scummy things my government does on a daily basis. Plus, I'll admit this, I don't know jack shit about Chinese communism, alright? I only know what I've been researching. And what I've been researching is heavily biased by the Western imperialist propaganda machine. So part of this is me having to fucking deprogram myself and learn the truth about China, because it's certainly not going to come from Western sources like The Guardian, ladies and gentlemen. Fucking hilarious. So I said the US bourgeoisie is shitting their pants and losing the economic dominance over the third world. And you say, seriously, have you been to China? The burgeoning middle class is so bonkers over American nonsense they will literally sell a kidney for an iPhone. So I took the liberty of clicking on that article and looking at it. If it will fucking... God damn it. The fuck? Oh, it was still in the picture. Jesus Christ. Fucking cringe over here, ladies and gentlemen. It's amateur hour. Danky Kang, I'm not a good YouTuber. I don't know when you guys are gonna understand this. I'm not fucking talented. Literally any jack off with OBS and a decent microphone can make the videos I make. Alright? All this is to say I'm not special. Alright? Don't get a cult of personality around me, dudes. Because I'm just a face in the crowd and anybody can make this shit. So, I mean, this is a Vice article. I can talk about Vice in the future. Why they're not a good source, but I mean, all this is just some fucking idiot sold his kidney to buy an iPhone. Like, he didn't have to do it. The surgeons that did it were arrested apparently because, you know, it's not medically ethical to do that. To just take some dude's kidney out. Fucking stupid. But this guy sent me that article like, haha, I owned you, buddy. Checkmate. I don't... Checkmate? I mean, all you prove to me is that people are stupid in whatever country you're from. And that, you know, Apple fans are fucking weird. That's all you prove to me. Says third world nation building rhetoric might have some currency in an intellectual discourse 60 years ago. All you are engaging in as of this moment, however, is apologia for an empire practicing World Bank-esque neo-colonialism. This is going to be really funny, as you're about to see. In a fascistic regime declaring itself a civilization state. How do you manage to be so self-righteous, yet choose such a wrong side of history to stand on? Well, at least I'm not standing with the US, you fucking chode. So you want to talk about the wrong side of history? Jesus Christ. Your side's the most wrongest there's ever been. But I digress. Let's take a look at these fucking articles that this genius of a guy sent me here. So this is International Policy Digest, China and Neo-Colonialism in Africa by Daniel Wagner. But before we read this, ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind, he accused China of practicing World Bank-esque neo-colonialism. So let's read who Daniel Wagner is, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel Wagner is the founder and CEO of Country Risk Solutions and a widely published author on current affairs and risk management. He began his career at AIG in New York and subsequently spent 5 years as a guarantee officer for the Asia region at the World Bank Group's Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency in Washington, D.C. Hey, dipshit. You know that thing you accused China of doing, wanting to practice World Bank-esque neo-colonialism? In the article you sent me, you're literally citing an article written by a World Bank shill. Congratulations! This is your brain on anarchism, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus fucking Christ. I could hardly believe it when I looked it up. A large-scale study on hundreds of active energy projects commissioned by the World Bank Group has concluded the body is currently financing $21 billion of fossil fuel projects compared to $7 billion in the renewable sector. It found for every dollar the bank currently holds in the clean power sector, it holds 3 across coal, oil, and gas. The author of the study, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change member and U.S.-based finance analyst Heike Mainhardt, said the findings served to evidence the fact that the World Bank is, quote, getting around its 2013 no-coal policy. So, this guy worked for an organization that is basically a shield for imperialism done on the behalf of big oil. Oh, but let's see what his totally non-biased and completely objective opinion is on China. Keep in mind that any gripes he might have about Chinese quote-unquote neo-colonialism in Africa is probably just because he wants the World Bank to be able to get its grubby little fucking hands all over African oil. So anyway, he says, many analysts contend that China has become the new face of neo-colonialism in Africa, having loaned tens of billions of dollars to the continent's governments, while knowing that in all likelihood many of those debts will never be repaid. Beijing proceeded on the presumption that its access to Africa's markets, enhanced influence, and ability to exploit the continent's rich deposits of natural resources would compensate it for any unpaid loans. So, in other words, China, using the Belt Roads Initiative, is going to build infrastructure. You can consider this imperialism in a way. It's a very strange way, because it's not unlike any kind of imperialism done on the behalf of the West or traditionally capitalist countries. If I had to call China anything, I would call it a state capitalist country controlled by a proletariat government. But as I learn more, that definition and that qualification could definitely change in my book. So don't chisel that in stone and say Danke said that China is a state capitalist proletarian state, because I might not be right about that. This is just my hot take on it. But I'm pretty sure my take on it's better than fucking Daniel Wagner's, alright? So, do I think that this quote-unquote imperialism done in China is good? Not necessarily. I don't think it's done for the benefit of the African people. I think it's done for the benefit of the Chinese people and strengthening China's geopolitical position on the world economy. But do I think that it's necessarily to the detriment of the African people? Unlike Western imperialism? No, not at all. I think if you can build up their countries, build up their economies, even if they are reliant on China, better for them to be reliant on China than reliant on the US and on the West. Because, as we've seen, America doesn't give a fuck, and the West doesn't give a fuck about building up the infrastructure in these countries, only insofar as they can break it down later and do disaster capitalism. For that, you might want to check out Naomi Watts' book, Disaster Capitalism. But, kind of going off topic here, what China is doing in Africa, can it be considered imperialism? I guess in a way, sort of. But it's, rather than sending troops and boots on the ground, they're sending investors. Which is worse? Well, definitely the boots on the ground. Definitely the American version of imperialism. If we're going to call what this is imperialism. It says, Chinese investment in Africa has a long history dating back to the Ming Dynasty, but it was not until the late 20th century when China pursued what is now commonly referred to as a debt trap diplomacy in order to have its way with Africa. In 2000, China's official loans to Africa have been just in the millions of dollars. Johns Hopkins University has estimated that between 2000 and 2015, Chinese governments, banks, and contractors have loaned $94 billion to African governments and state-owned enterprises. Many countries welcomed Chinese investment because it did not come with strings attached, such as a requirement for free elections, gender equality, anti-corruption programs, or government accountability. Many African leaders' willingness to agree to Chinese funding, whether for natural resource extraction, infrastructure building, or for commercial purposes, has come at a cost. Many people in Africa have complained that workers are not treated fairly. The environment has not been well considered, and much of the Chinese-built construction is shoddy and dangerous. Regardless of the quality of the construction, the loans must, at least in theory, be repaid to China. Adding to government's debt burden, two highly indebted poor countries, HIPCs, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia have particularly high levels of Chinese government debt, raising the question about how these loans may ultimately be repaid, at what cost, and what sacrifices the governments may have to make to repay those loans. This has led some analysts to suggest that the relationship between China and Africa has become toxic. Much of the debt of the HIPC was written off by lenders just after the millennium. As a result of China's aggressive lending throughout the developing world, particularly in Africa, countries such as Zambia have accumulated almost as much debt as they had before the previous generation of national debt had been written off. Between 2013 and 2018, Zambia's national debt tripled as a percentage of national income. Most of it was owed to China. Some NGOs consider the accumulation of debt unnecessary and reckless on the part of the African government, which they maintain certainly share the blame for the continent's predicament vis-a-vis China. After all, no one forced them to accept the loans. Some projects were considered vanity spending to help get politicians elected or re-elected. In Zambia, for example, Chinese loans paid for 2 new airports and a variety of roads to nowhere, while the country still lacked so many basic needs. While it takes 2 to tango, a lender and a borrower, development loans are often difficult to obtain, so free-spending Beijing had an obligation to ensure that the borrowers understood the implication of accepting its money. Yet responsible long-term lending has often taken a back seat to near-term objectives such as resource extraction. No one in Zambia believes that China was simply going to forgive its debt. In 2018, Kenya's public debt first surpassed the $50 billion mark. At that time, China was Kenya's largest lender by far, accounting for $72 of bilateral debt, a 15% increase from 2016. Kenya's debt to China was also 8 times more than what it had received from its next largest lender, France. Overall, China accounted for more than 21% of Kenya's external debt that year. Coinciding with Moody's downgrading blah blah blah, Jesus fuck. The IMF sees Kenya's access to $1.5 billion standby credit facility due to non-compliance with fiscal targets, urging Nairobi to lower its deficits. Where's the responsibility? Blah blah blah. Oh, this is a different article. Alright, so the article concludes, as the world's natural resources become increasingly scarce, which is what this is really about, ladies and gentlemen. You honestly think this guy shilling for the fucking World Bank he honestly cares about the people of China? He honestly cares about the people of Africa? You're high off your ass. He cares about the natural resources. Alright, this is what it's about. It's about that oil. It's about coal. It's about gas. That's what it's always been about. That's what the World Bank wants. It's not sovereignty for African countries. It's, hey, Chinese people, keep your hands off Africa because that's our takings. That's our pickings right there. African countries have come to realize just how many cards they hold, and they finally have decided to stand up to China. Should African countries successfully manage to transition from nations that merely possess natural resources to manufacturing powers that can actually compete with China, the nature of their relationship with Beijing will change even further. That said, both sides know they ultimately need each other. The challenge will be to find the right balance between China's wealth, power, and money, and African countries' resources and vast potential. So all that said, how do I manage to be so self-righteous and yet choosing such a wrong side of history to stand on? Well, dude, at least I'm not standing on the side that sides with the National Endowment for Democracy, the World Bank, and U.S. colonialism and imperialism. That's all I gotta say.